actually glad to be here with you. So just a few words on the Paris Agreement. It is considered a historic agreement, and for the EU, it was really important because we consider it as a success. And what is really important is the ambition of this agreement. I think even we in the EU were surprised by the outcome. And but what this outcome means for us, it's really important that we really need to work more to way more to achieve this really big ambition. So yes, it's an ambitious agreement. What was important for us is that it's a transparent agreement. Something perhaps which is not talked that much, but it is very important that all these INDCs are turned into NDCs, and then there is actually a fair review of achievements of all countries around the world, because we in the EU are very used to have this transparency and to register all our emissions, all our efforts, but this is not necessarily true around the world. So for the first time in the Paris Agreement, there is this transparency and fairness for all countries. And fairness is also understood that actually the developed countries are taking responsibility for helping the developing countries, both in mitigation effort, but also in adaptation, because as we know, adaptation efforts are going to be very expensive, and the more we delay, the more expensive they will become. But I don't really need to explain this any further. You know it very well. So this is what our Commissioner Cañete said on 12th of December, that today we celebrate, but tomorrow we have to act, and we have to act around the globe, but we have to act in Europe as well. And so first, what is next on the international agenda? Here again, I won't go in detail, but what's important for us is this 5-year review of where everybody has gone, but also very important for us in the EU. So there's this, every 5 years there's a global stock take, but the 2018 is an important year because we will have the IPCC special report on how to reach 1.5 degrees rather than 2 degrees, or rather stay within 1.5. Because we know actually that what we have from INDCs is not going to bring us there. So this is one slide which is quite familiar to many of you, so I won't go into detail. Here I have a slide actually on what is happening in the EU, because every year we have a climate action progress report. And in November last year, this was a graph from the last climate action progress report. And at least in the EU, we are actually reaching our targets. And there's a high likelihood that in 2020, we will have reached 2020 target, which is reduction of 30% of the emissions. But 20%. And but what I wanted to point out is actually this little triangle there for 2030, that actually the trajectory for reducing the emissions becomes really steep. And this is what's our challenge is, how to continue reducing emissions, because so far we have been successful. So in the EU, actually, you can see that the gross GDP so the economic value has been increasing while the greenhouse gas emissions are decreasing. But will we be able to continue this line actually of decoupling, and will we see this around the globe as well, because this is more or less what the trajectories should be. So you can see that indeed the effort is really big to come. So what's next on the domestic agenda? My Director General for Climate Action, of course, has two big parts in it. One is dealing with the international agenda, so everything to do with the international negotiations. But one really big part is actually working on the achieving of our targets within the EU. And in fact, after the Paris Agreement, the whole Director General was restructured to reinforce the domestic agenda, the achievement of the domestic agenda, because we realize how important it is to really deliver on what we have promised. And also that decarbonizing the economy or achieving the climate change targets is only one part of the energy union. We have actually 5 dimensions of the energy union, and first is the energy security, which is very, very important for our economies, for the citizens. A second priority is fully integrated European energy market, which is so important for example, for all these renewable energy targets we have. I mean, we can't have that much renewable energy if we don't have an integrated European energy market. A third goal, or maybe it's the first one even, quite often is the first one, is the energy efficiency. It's so important. Decarbonizing the economy, so these reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. And fifth goal, which is very, very important, and it's research, innovation, and competitiveness. Actually, if you read the communications on the energy union, you will find that CCS falls more in the research, innovation, and competitiveness strain of the energy union. But because there is an understanding that there is further research and development that needs to be done, even if we know that the technology is already there. But if we want to see reduction of the costs, we need to invest more in research. And actually this was confirmed in the previous presentation. So what is the European Union doing? Actually, we have a quite clear framework, the 2030 framework. So we have the 2020 targets, 2020. I won't go in detail, I'm sure you all know them. The 2030 targets actually are, of course, more ambitious, and the greenhouse gas emissions have to be reduced by 40%. And one important difference perhaps here to underline is that this 40% reduction is a domestic effort. So international credits don't count in this 40%. Another important thing, perhaps I have a slide on it, is that this effort, that's the slide. This effort is actually distributed, the 40%, between what is covered by the emission trading scheme, so it's the power sector and the industry, where the efforts, so the emissions have to be reduced further by 43%, and then what is known as the EU jargon non-ETS, which covers the transport, housing, and agriculture, where emissions have to be reduced by 30%. I mean, the reason is that it's so much more difficult to reduce emissions in these sectors. So what we are doing here in the next couple of, this is actually for this year, it's really delivering on the 2030 framework, the legislative proposals. The emission trading system, actually the proposal for review of the system was done already last year in 2015, and now it's in legislative process. And this year it's like the effort sharing decision, the LULUCF, there will be a communication on the carbonization of transport. There will be a revision of the energy efficiency directive, the electricity market design, renewables, and last but not least, integrated climate and energy governance. I'm sure you're asking why I'm talking all about that. There's no CCS mentioned here. But I mean, CCS is behind perhaps the scenes, but one important element is the emissions trading scheme. And even if CCS is not mentioned, what we know is that emissions have to be reduced, as I mentioned earlier, more and more. So CCS becomes very important technology, even if our approach in the EU has been technology neutrality. So the EU has the emission trading scheme and doesn't prefer one technology over the other. What is happening, of course, at national level is that member states quite often choose their policies to support renewable energy and energy efficiency, for example, because I don't know why. Well, I can imagine why. Because they can see that investments pay off quite much faster, and investments perhaps are not that big. But this doesn't mean that at some point they will not need to invest in CCS. And this is actually what we will try to bring to their attention through this integrated climate and energy governance, because member states will have to submit their plans how they're going to reach the greenhouse gas emissions for 2030. Unfortunately, we call it long-term policies 2030. I know that in research long-term is really not 2030, it's 2050 or 2100. But that's why in the plans which the member states are going to write and present from next year, they have to indicate how they're going to reach the 2030 targets, but with an outlook to 2050. Because we want to bring the attention to them that they really need to plan. And CCS is in particular technology which needs a long-term planning. And we fear that member states will not mention CCS, or will not start thinking of CCS right from now, because they see, and in our modeling it's shown that CCS is needed only from 2030 onwards. But we all know that we need to invest already from now. This is the key elements of the reformed EU ETS, what I already mentioned in a way. And what's really, really important with the EU ETS is that actually we have the expectation that the carbon price will rise. Because, I mean, we all know that CCS doesn't have a business case now in the EU, but this will not be the case in the future. So another slide here to remind you actually that the EU ETS is creating a lot of revenues, and for example, member states in like the period 2020 to 2030, more than 6 billion allowances will be auctioned, and actually this is creating a lot of revenues for the member states. And you have an outreach to the member states, and perhaps you should be asking questions where member states are putting these revenues, because they do have an obligation. And actually, from the first 2 years of reporting, 2013 and 14, this is of course this current cycle of the EU ETS, actually we see that most member states are using this graph which shows that are using their auction revenues to invest in climate and energy related projects. So it's actually quite positive. Only the red bits here on the graph, so these are the revenues which are used from allowances to climate and energy purposes, and only the red bits is revenue which is not used for climate and energy purposes. So overall it's actually quite positive, and so this auction revenues is one way to support development of low carbon technologies. The EU ETS is actually also creating directly funds to support low carbon technologies, and we have the NER 300 program in this current period, which many of you know has supported or intended to support more correctly one project, the White Rose project in the UK. We don't know whether the White Rose project will continue. We hope so. But in the future, there will be innovation funds from 2021, which will have 450 million allowances. So for the amount, of course, it will depend on the carbon price. And of course, there is the modernization fund for energy investments in low-income member states. These are about 10 member states. And this is for modernization of their energy systems. So there we don't know actually whether there will be any CCS projects, but there is certainly an opportunity there as well. Yeah, so what role for CCS? So I explained at length the ETS directive. I will perhaps skip my slides on the CCS directive. I will just mention that, of course, I hope you all know that we have a CCS directive. We did a review of the CCS directive in 2014, and I will just, you have the slides anyhow, but the outcome actually of this review, I will not go into it, is that the CCS directive is fit for purpose, actually. So even the trouble with this review was that it was mandated by the directive itself, so we had to do it in 2015. but there was not enough practical experience of the application of the provisions of the directive. So with the limited evidence we could gather, we found, and there was extensive stakeholder consultation, and I can imagine some of you participated in it. The conclusion is the directive is fit for purpose, so we don't need to change it. So this was kind of a relief, because in fact stakeholders were concerned that when we did a review, then we'll start revising the directive. No, this was not actually the aims of the review. The review was just to make sure that the directive is fit for purpose. And I just want to here explain that in fact the next review of the directive is not planned, so we don't have a date for it. Most probably we will do it when we have enough experience with applying the directive. However, member states are obliged, irrespective of experience or not, to provide reports to the Commission on the implementation of the directive every 3 years, and actually this period was this April 2016 for the reporting of the member states, and we have received already a number of reports. We helped the reporting of the member states by sending a number of questions they could answer, and these questions were some of them linked to the directive, but we used the opportunity to ask questions on how they see CCS in their future planning, and whether they plan CO2 transport and storage infrastructure, hubs and clusters, transboundary cooperation. We are waiting for the report, so I can't say anything now, but we are likely to come up with a report, even if it is required within 9 months. We want to come up with a report in November or December this year, because there is streamlining of Commission reporting on energy and climate. So we will see at the end of the year what the outcome is. I will have to really conclude here, because I don't want to take all of the time, but we understand very well. I just want to say just a few words on the enabling policy, and in fact what my slides are showing is actually quite similar to what Isabel was saying about what has to be done in CCS, and we are really aware that support for commercial scale demonstration projects is needed. This actually map is a map of projects supported at EU level in Europe, and a number of the projects actually are not continuing, but of course they have delivered important results for research and for the future. We need to step up research and innovation activities, and my colleague Vasilios Kogionis, I'm sure, will talk to you tomorrow about Horizon 2020 and the set plan. And member states, what I mentioned already, need to consider CCS in their long-term planning. And one last bit is we need really to plan and share the CO2 transport and storage infrastructure, because for example, under the Connecting Europe facility, there is money available to support projects of common interest. And I had a few slides on that, but I'm not going to talk about it because it's all in very, very early stage of development. But basically what's important is to create actually concepts of projects of common interest, because in order for projects to be supported under the Connecting Europe facility, they need to enter in the list of projects of common interest, and the next list actually will be adopted by the Commission next year, end of next year. So really time is now to work on them. And now I know that on the last day there is a section on devoted on projects of common interest. Unfortunately, my colleague Beatrice Coda was not able to come to the conference, but that's why I have here some slides, and I will be happy to answer later on questions on them if I can answer them. But what's really, really important is the member state support behind such projects, and minimum, obviously, 2 projects, because these are projects of European interest. So that's my really last and finishing slide. Perhaps it's not very optimistic, but I really do believe that CCS is an important technology, and this is what the European Commission is stating in all communications. what we really need to, in my view, do is, as you all the time, actually I hear it from all of you, is underline the importance of acting now, investing now in CCS, because these projects need a long time to see light. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.